As President Biden is about to address the nation back home concerning the latest developments in Israel's war against Hamas. The president already promising, quote, rock solid and unwavering support for Israel. Our team, of course, right here on the ground where the violence is escalating at this hour. Graphic details just emerging as this war now enters its fourth day. Israeli military now reporting the massacre of women, children, toddlers, and elderly at a kibbutz in southern Israel. Just a short time ago, the terror group firing hundreds of rockets toward Ashkelon, a coastal city in southern Israel that's just north of Gaza. Images coming in showing boats on fire, smoke rising into the sky, at least one woman injured. Israel has vowed a total siege of Gaza, in their words, and here in Israel, soldiers are now amassing along the border with Gaza, preparing for what could be a ground incursion. 300,000 reservists had already been called up, another 60,000 today. Israeli airstrikes have been relentlessly pounding away at targets in Gaza, buildings leveled, neighborhoods wiped out. The war now in its fourth day, as I mentioned, it's already taking a very large human toll here. More than 900 people killed in Israel after that surprise attack from Hamas. At least 11 Americans among the victims. That number, of course, could rise. More than 800 now dead in Gaza. And there is, of course, tremendous concern for more than 100 hostages taken from Israel, including those taken during a music festival, some dragged from their homes in communities and villages. Hamas now threatening to kill the hostages one by one on camera for the world to see every time an Israeli airstrike hits Gazans in their homes without warning. The U.S. is already surging supplies, weapons, and air defenses to Israel. President Biden set to address the country. Let's listen.
Good afternoon. You know, there are moments in this life, and I mean this literally, when the pure, unadulterated evil is unleashed on this world. The people of Israel lived through one such moment this weekend. The bloody hands of the terrorist organization Hamas, a group whose stated purpose for being is to kill Jews. This was an act of sheer evil. More than 1,000 civilians slaughtered, not just killed, slaughtered in Israel. Among them, at least 14 American citizens killed. Parents butchered using their bodies to try to protect their children. Stomach-turning reports of babies being killed. Entire families slain. Young people massacred while attending a musical festival to celebrate peace. To celebrate peace. Women raped, assaulted, paraded as trophies. Families hid their fear for hours and hours, desperately trying to keep their children quiet to avoid drawing attention. And thousands of wounded, alive but carrying with them the bullet holes and the shrapnel wounds and the memory of what they endured. You all know these traumas never go away. There's still so many families desperately waiting to hear the fate of their loved ones, not knowing if they're alive or dead or hostages. Infants in their mother's arms, grandparents in wheelchairs, Holocaust survivors abducted and held hostage. Hostages whom Hamas has now threatened to execute in violation of every code of human morality. It's abhorrent. The brutality of Hamas, these bloodthirstiness brings to mind the worst rampages of ISIS. This is terrorism. But sadly, for the Jewish people, it's not new. This attack has brought to the surface painful memories and the scars left by a millennia of anti-Semitism and genocide of the Jewish people. So in this moment, we must be crystal clear. We stand with Israel. We stand with Israel. And we will make sure Israel has what it needs to take care of its citizens, defend itself, and respond to this attack. There's no justification for terrorism. There's no excuse. Hamas does not stand for the Palestinian people's right to dignity and self-determination. Its stated purpose is the annihilation of the state of Israel and the murder of Jewish people. They use Palestinian civilians as human shields. Hamas offers nothing but terror and bloodshed with no regard to who pays the price. The loss of innocent life is heartbreaking. Like every nation in the world, Israel has the right to respond, indeed has a duty to respond to these vicious attacks. I just got off the phone with the third call with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I told him, the United States experience what Israel is experiencing, our response would be swift, decisive, and overwhelming. We also discussed how democracies like Israel and the United States are stronger and more secure when we act according to the rule of law. Terrorists purposely target civilians, kill them. We uphold the laws of war, the law of war. It matters. There's a difference. Today, Americans across the country are praying for all those families that have been ripped apart. A lot of us know how it feels. It leaves a black hole in your chest when you lose family. Feeling like you're being sucked in. The anger, the pain, the sense of hopelessness. This is what they mean by a human tragedy, an atrocity on an appalling scale. We're going to continue to stand united, supporting the people of Israel who are suffering unspeakable losses and opposing the hatred and violence of terrorism. My team has been in near constant communication with our Israeli partners and partners all across the region and the world from the moment this crisis began. We're surging additional military assistance, including ammunition and interceptors, to replenish Iron Dome. We're going to make sure that Israel does not run out of these critical assets to defend its cities and its citizens. My administration has consulted closely with Congress throughout this crisis. When Congress returns, we're going to ask them to take urgent action to fund the national security requirements of our critical partners. This is not about party or politics. This is about the security of our world, the security of the United States of America. We now know that American citizens are among those being held by Hamas. I've directed my team to share intelligence and deploy additional experts from across the United States government to consult with and advise Israeli counterparts on hostage recovery efforts. Because as president, I have no higher priority than the safety of Americans being held hostage around the world. The United States has also enhanced our military force posture in the region to strengthen our deterrence. The Department of Defense has moved the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group to the Eastern Mediterranean and bolstered our fighter aircraft presence. And we stand ready to move in additional assets as needed. Let me say again, to any country, any organization, anyone thinking of taking advantage of this situation, I have one word: don't. Don't. Our hearts may be broken, but our resolve is clear. Yesterday, I also spoke with the leaders of France, Germany, Italy, and UK to discuss the latest developments with our European allies and coordinate our united response. This comes on top of days of steady engagement with partners across the region. We're also taking steps at home. In cities across the United States of America, police departments have stepped up security around centers of Jewish life. The Department of Homeland Security and the Federal Bureau of Investigation are working closely with state and local law enforcement and Jewish community partners to identify and disrupt any domestic threat that could emerge in connection with these horrific attacks. This is a moment for the United States to come together, to grieve with those who are mourning. Let's be real clear. There is no place for hate in America. Not against Jews, not against Muslims, not against anybody. We reject. What we reject is terrorism. We condemn the indiscriminate evil, just as we've always done. That's what America stands for. You know, just over 50 years ago, I was thinking about it this morning, talking to the Secretary of State, the Vice President in my office. Over 50 years ago, as a young senator, I visited Israel for the first time as a newly elected senator. And I had a long, long trip, a meeting with Golda Meir in her office just before the Yom Kippur War. And I guess she could see the consternation on my face as she described what was being faced, they were facing. We walked outside in that sort of hallway outside her office to have some photos. She looked at me all of a sudden and said, "Would you like to have a photograph?" And so I got up and followed her out. We were standing there silent, looking at the press. She could tell, I guess, I was concerned. She leaned over and whispered to me, she said, "Don't worry, Senator Biden. We have a secret weapon here in Israel." My word is what she said. We have no place else to go. We have no place else to go. For 75 years, Israel has stood as the ultimate guarantor of the security of Jewish people around the world, so that the atrocities of the past could never happen again. And let there be no doubt, the United States has Israel's back. We will make sure the Jewish and democratic state of Israel can defend itself today, tomorrow, as we always have. It's as simple as that. These atrocities have been sickening. We're with Israel. Let's make no mistake. Thank you.
Mr. President, what was your reaction?
President Biden in the state dining room at the White House talking about Israel at war and, of course, that surprise and brutal attack from Hamas over the weekend. He made news here just moments ago saying for the first time that we now know that Americans are among the kidnapped being held by Hamas. He said, "I have no higher priority than American hostages being held around the world." He also said, let's make this crystal clear. We stand with Israel, that Israel has a right and should respond to Hamas. I want to get to our chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell. And Ian, he didn't talk about, obviously, the hundreds of thousands of Israeli troops amassed now along this border with Gaza, whether or not there could be a ground incursion coming. But he did make it very clear that the U.S. stands with Israel.
Yes, that's right. I mean, and he also talks about that if it were the U.S., there would be this swift, decisive response, and that would seem to indicate something of a green light to Israel that it can respond in this way. I mean, we've seen this build up over a number of days of this military infrastructure that you would need for any kind of ground invasion. There are huge challenges. I mean, having the munitions and the military support, which President Biden referred to there, I think is probably essential for Israel, not just to have the moral support, but to have the physical support. But there are huge challenges also to try and conduct that kind of operation on the ground. It's a challenge of a standing regular army to try and take on a guerrilla organization. Hamas has benefited from using guerrilla tactics, catching Israel by surprise. There's a huge challenge for Israel to try and respond. I think the statement from President Biden, the support of the American people will be hugely welcome. I think the presence of the aircraft carrier also sends an important signal of support. And if Congress elects, the House elects a speaker, and there are then decisions and funds allocated, that also will be important. I think the other thing that stood out for me was a very clear warning from President Biden for any other country or organization, a clear reference to Iran or Hezbollah, one of its proxy groups, up across the northern border into Lebanon, that if any of them are thinking of capitalizing on this situation, his message was very simple: don't. Now, what would the consequences be if they did do that? Well, we don't know. But I think the posture of the United States indicates not just standing with Israel, but also standing with Israel against its enemies.
Ian Pannell, our chief foreign correspondent, with me here in Israel for this. Ian, thank you. I want to bring in James Longman, also live here in Tel Aviv. And James, you and I have been talking with many families who await word on their loved ones. We know of at least 100 people. That number could go higher, being held captive, hostage by Hamas inside Gaza. And you heard the president there for the first time acknowledge that the U.S. does believe Americans are among those being held hostage. The big challenge here, James, though, for Israel is moving forward with its retaliation, and yet knowing there's now been this threat from Hamas to take action to kill the hostages if these strikes hit homes of civilians inside Gaza.
Yeah, David, and he said there was no greater priority than to bringing Americans home from their captivity around the world. I mean, look, I sat across from one woman who had lost her daughter at that desert rave just across from Gaza, that party where young people were out celebrating her daughter, a 22-year-old girl, now missing. She's not sure where she is. She could be in Gaza. She could be dead. She's not sure. And there are families like her who are going from hospital to hospital here in Israel with DNA. She told me about her father, Kim's father, with a hairbrush of Kim, trying to see if there was a match at all, to see if there was a match among the dead. There is no greater loss than the loss of a child. You heard President Biden there talking about the black hole of the loss. And for this mother, she didn't know if her child was dead or taken by Hamas. And imagine to have to choose between one of those two realities. I spoke to another family whose daughter was taken by Hamas. They saw it. They saw the video. We all saw the videos of people being taken on the backs of motorbikes, in trucks, over the border into Gaza. And this young girl, Karina, a young IDF recruit, 19 years old, bloodied and bound. I sat with her mother and her sister at home, and her mother is staring at the television now with tears streaming down her face, wondering when she's going to get news. And the way that she might get news is by Hamas announcing the execution of her daughter. And there are families like that now, not sure when they're going to hear and what they're going to hear. The Israelis are trying to inform families. We understand as many as 50 to 100 families have been informed now about the status of their children or their loved ones. But beyond that, it's very difficult for the Israelis to know exactly what's going on in Gaza. And yes, how do they get them out? This is a densely populated strip of land, 2.3 million people living cheek by jowl. It's every chance that Hamas or the other terrorist organizations that operate in Gaza have taken these people and have spread them across the strip, put them down into the tunnels that operate there, deep inside basements. How on earth will their loved ones be saved, especially when we're watching these pictures now, these endless bombardments that have brought so many buildings down? David?
These are just excruciating stories to hear. James, thank you for that. And I spoke with a young husband who was on the phone with his wife, their two young daughters, 2 and 4. They were visiting their grandmother when the militants arrived right outside the door. They were taken away. The call was cut. He didn't hear again from his wife until he saw a video online recognizing the wife. You'll remember that moment. Here's the young father right here. Sees his wife on this video, a cover being placed on her head. That was the last he saw of her. Of course, the last he heard was that phone call. And now he awaits word, like so many of the families that James Longman just described there. It's just extraordinary to think about these parents, these partners who are waiting for word on their loved ones. And now, as we heard moments ago from President Biden, we know among the families who are going through this agonizing process are American families back in the U.S. and right here in Israel. You also heard the president describe the parents who used their bodies as human shields to save their children from these Hamas terrorists. I want to bring in Matt Gutman, who traveled to southern Israel for us today. And Matt was given extraordinary access with the Israeli military to some of these villages that have now been left behind. And Matt, I know you saw the astounding aftermath.
It was deceiving at first, David, because we walked into this kibbutz called Kfar Aza, which is about 5 miles in that direction. And at first it seemed very pastoral, leafy trees. There was still fruit on some of the fruit trees. And as you progressed deeper into this community, you started to see more of the destruction. Cars with rear windshields shattered, bullet holes everywhere. And we got deeper and deeper, and entire neighborhoods just obliterated. charred apartments and homes, toys strewn on the floor, and everywhere the pockmarks of bullets. And this was such a tenuous situation, David, because as we entered, we heard automatic and machine gun fire nearby. Israel had not yet secured this place yet. They were still looking for infiltrators. In fact, until just about half an hour ago, there were infiltrators in this area. So they hadn't fully secured the area. They also hadn't counted the bodies. They hadn't retrieved all of the dead. And we were there, and hear some of the booms from Gaza nearby, and we were there as they started taking out the bodies. And one of the generals describing what President Biden talked about, that it was images that he had seen in the Holocaust, a kind of barbarity that he would never have imagined. He described it in this row of houses used by the youth in that kibbutz, that children's throats were slit. Absolute horror that he struggled to talk about on camera with me. It was very, very harrowing, and it's doubtful that anybody can go back and live in those communities again, David.
It's very difficult to wrap your head around this kind of horror being witnessed by the world. Matt Gutman, our thanks to you. And I want to bring in our Chief Global Affairs correspondent, Martha Raddatz, also with us for our coverage. And Martha, you heard the president talking about sending the supplies Israel will need to keep the Iron Dome effective in this fight against Hamas. He also talked about the carrier, and there's word late today that a second one, there's now discussions about the possibility that that could come to the region too.
Exactly, David. It's the Eisenhower aircraft carrier. It was supposed to be deployed to the Middle East. It may instead stay in the Mediterranean with the other aircraft carrier and, of course, numerous other warships packed with fighter jets in the region. So that is definitely something they are discussing. This, of course, is a deterrent. You heard the president, and Ian mentioned this as well, warn anyone who wants to make this situation worse, say, don't do it. He is speaking to Hezbollah, the proxy of Iran, and he is speaking to Iran. A U.S. official told me today they have seen no hard evidence, no smoking gun, that Iran had direct responsibility for this attack. But of course, he said there is complicity because Iran has supplied weapons, has supplied money, has supplied resources to Hamas. But at this point, the official made very clear they don't yet have a smoking gun. But this is indeed a warning, a deterrent, and they may double that deterrent in the coming weeks, David.
Martha Raddatz, our Chief Global Affairs correspondent, live in Washington. Martha, thank you. Let's bring in Mary Bruce, standing by at the White House. Mary, we heard the president there moments ago saying we have Israel's back, that they have a right and a duty to respond to Hamas. He didn't explicitly say he supports the idea of a ground incursion at this point. Of course, we don't even know if Israel plans to move ahead with that. They have signaled that it's a very real possibility. He did signal, however, that he's talked 3 times now with the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, expressing U.S. support here.
David, the president making it very clear that the U.S. is going to continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel, no matter what steps they take going forward. And what really stood out to me here is that this wasn't just a forceful condemnation from the president. He was detailing in painful detail the atrocities and the horror that we have seen unfolding. The president speaking not just as a president, but as an American, as a human being who, like all of us, is outraged by what he is seeing. All of this to underscore why he said so bluntly that America stands with Israel, full stop. And he did also address the Palestinian people, saying Hamas doesn't represent the Palestinian people, that they don't represent or recognize their legitimate aspirations for dignity and self-determination. He said point blank, this is terrorism. And you heard him not only confirming, of course, that American citizens are being held hostage, but that the death toll has now climbed to 14 up from 11. The president again saying that American safety is his top priority. His team is working closely with Israelis on this rescue effort. The president doing everything he can to try and bring them back, David.
14 American lives lost. That was the update from the president moments ago. Mary, one quick follow-up for you, because not only does the prime minister here, Benjamin Netanyahu, face extraordinary pressure here about the lives of the hostages, those being held captive in Gaza as they continue to retaliate here, but now President Biden on the world stage faces pressure, too, to try to get these hostages, these souls being held captive out and back to their families alive.
And there are real questions now about what exactly this will look like going forward. What lengths will the U.S. go to? We know the president has said, officials have underscored this to us, that the U.S. is offering to share intelligence, to share experts in this matter with the Israelis. But just what does this look like going forward is still a big question. The U.S., though, vowing to do everything it can. What are the details of that, though, David? One of many questions that still remains here.
A major question going forward. Mary Bruce, live at the White House. Mary, our thanks to you and to all of our teams on the ground here in Israel, their photographers, their crew. Of course, this is a very dangerous situation, and we appreciate everyone's efforts here on the ground. Our coverage continues on ABC News Live, abcnews.com, and I'll be back with the entire team for World News Tonight. I'll see you then. I'm David Muir in Tel Aviv. Good day.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
It's a receipt from a music shop in Brooklyn. Pretty recent, too.
Marshall must have used that shop to refurbish his clarinet.
But he gave me the clarinet. Why would he go back to the shop?
To buy a new one? Maybe the shop owner knows where Marshall lives. You won't know unless you ask. Do you give up the first time you look through a microscope?
What do you think?
I refuse to give up on Wiley, and I will not let you give up on your father.
Another voice in the room. Aunt Stella already weighed in.
Well, I'm sure she and I agree, and I'm very honored to be in such distinguished company. So what did Aunt Stella have to say?
She said that I should talk it out with Marshall and get the answers that I want, no matter how much they hurt.
It's really good advice. So, what are you gonna do about it?
I never claimed to be perfect, and I don't expect perfection from Dad or anyone else.
Great, then cut the man some slack. Okay, have a chat with him, man to man, figure out what kind of relationship you're gonna have. Isn't that in Wiley's best interest, in everyone's best interest?
So Dad was given a second chance in life, and how did he use it? By turning his back on his family to be with the woman who kept him from us for almost a year. I can't get past that. Look, Dad made his choice, I made mine.
Yeah, you know, you sound just like him right now.
Part of me is convinced the pain will never go away until I find out where it came from and who my real mom is. But at the same time, I'm not sure I'm ready. Maybe I never will be.
And here I thought you were ready to turn your back on Michael, but now you want to help?
Yeah, Michael turned his back on me. He's still my son, and you know, it's my job to protect.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Good. So now you're going to tell me what's going on with Valentine and how I can help.
Look, it's only as much as your friendship means to me. The answer's no.
This is how we're starting it off?
I don't want you to be mad. It's got to be intimidating. Civilians don't have to play Jeopardy with a detective.
Especially when you're guilty.
Celebrity Jeopardy! New Wednesday, 7 Central on ABC.
You weren't made for moderate to severe Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, but Entyvio is. In clinical trials, Entyvio helped many people achieve long-term relief and remission. Infusion and serious allergic reactions can happen during or after treatment. Entyvio may increase risk of infection, which can be serious. Although unlikely, a risk of PML, a rare, serious, potentially fatal brain infection, cannot be ruled out. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, experience frequent infections, or have flu-like symptoms or sores. Liver problems can occur. It's time to ask your healthcare provider about Entyvio. Go to Entyvio.com to learn more about the #1 prescribed biologic for Crohn's and UC.
Entyvio, Entyvio, Entyvio.
Theo's nose was cause for alarm, so Dad brought Puffs Plus lotion to save it from harm. Puffs has 50% more lotion and brings soothing relief. Don't get burned by winter nose. A nose in need deserves Puffs, indeed. America's #1 lotion tissue.
The Chewy app has everything for pets. Hungry pets, itchy pets, scratchy pets, and most importantly, your pet. Everyday great prices and 35% off your first auto ship order. Right to your door. Download the Chewy app.
Dude, you coming? Alka-Seltzer Plus Power Max Gels, cold and flu relief with more concentrated power. Because the only thing dripping should be your style. Plop Plop Fizz Biz Winter Warriors with Alka-Seltzer Plus.
It's another ultimate endless shrimp
Flavor drop.
with new tequila lime shrimp. One of 7 endless choices. Right now, only at Red Lobster. Welcome to fun dining.
Yeah, with Metro, there's no contracts, no price hikes, no surprises. There's not a yada yada.
Yada yada.
Contract yada yada.
Price hike yada yada.
Not a yada yada means wireless without the gotcha. Only at Metro.
Cinnamon Toast Crunch, blasted with Cinnadust.
Hey, it's me, your dry skin. I'm craving something we're missing. The ceramides in CeraVe. CeraVe with 3 essential ceramides helps restore my natural barrier so I can lock in moisture and we can feel it long after. CeraVe moisturizers.
Thanks.
Jake from State Farm, I really need to know.
Go spicy or go home, right?
What? No. What if I'm not sure I have the right coverage for my car?
Oh, your agent can help me make sure it's just what you need.
What if I accidentally hit a food truck and it gets covered in empanadas?
You can file a claim on the app. At State Farm, we're there for your what-ifs.
Thanks.
Oh.
That is too spicy. That's for you.
Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Call or click to get a quote today.
Try killing bugs the worry-free way. Not the other way. Zevo traps use light to attract and trap flying insects with no odor and no mess. They work continuously.